No, you don't need. You don't need the.
I'm doing legend. He a 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 legend. Welcome to the league. 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 Welcome to the league. To the league. To the league. To the league. To the league.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video we're going to adjust our LPL rankings. There is a new number one team in China. They're on their New Year break, so we're not going to have any LPL action for 2 weeks, so it's a good time to reevaluate our positions on all these teams. Disclaimer, I don't think that a lot of these players are actually bad relative to other League of Legends players, even if you're comparing them to players from Korea, Europe, or the LCS. I have a very high opinion of the LPL. Some people think that the bottom half of the LPL is like weak, but I think there's only probably 3 teams that I would consider not like LPL standard, and even if they're not LPL standard, they'd still be like a bottom of the table team in Korea and better than a lot of the other teams in the West. And that's not a fun thing for me to say. I wish that the Western regions were stronger, but I think everyone else would be shocked at how competitive these teams would be if you took them and put them into like North America or something like that. So I'm not going to do like international rankings in this video comparing leagues to one another. This is just China, just the LPL. Once I get through all of these regions again, then maybe I'll do another one where I try to figure out where exactly these teams line up. But we need some more games for that as well. So let's talk about what each rank means. So in this video, I have S, A, B, C, D. Teams in the D tier, and there's no F tier because like I reserve F for internationally, where there's no future hope for this team ever in any way. Just like they shouldn't even be an organization, basically. And the only 2 teams in that tier are from the LCS. But in China, we start in the D tier. The D tier is not competitive. And when I say not competitive, I mean not competitive with playoff teams specifically. I think that they can take games off of the teams in the C tier, and you know, maybe a game off of the B tier or these other teams, but you shouldn't expect them to, and you don't expect them to win the matches against the teams in the higher tiers in them. In the C tier, this is the group of teams that I think will be competitive with the playoff teams. I don't expect these teams to make it to playoffs. Like, I have my 8 teams that I think will be in playoffs. I think it's only 8 in playoffs in the LPL. I forget if they changed the way the playoffs work, but I have 4 teams in the C tier. In the B tier, I have my first 3 teams that I expect to make playoffs, but I'm not convinced they have a chance to win the championship. Obviously, anything can happen in the playoffs. Somebody can go on a great run, but I don't expect these teams to do that. Then I have 3 teams in the A tier. That this is probably where people are going to start getting upset with me, is like the A and the B tier about how I have the teams ranked. And then the S tier, I have 2 teams. I have the former number 1 and the new number 1. That might give away a little bit for what you should expect. But let's start off in the D tier. So I'm going to bring the tier list up onto the screen now. And you can probably see some of the other logos. So there we are. So the team that I have in 17th, and it's splitting hairs within a tier, but I do think that the worst team in China right now is ThunderTalk. So ThunderTalk Gaming has lost to OMG. They've lost to Invictus Gaming, EDG, which you're not going to, make too much noise about. They lost to RNG. They lost to Weibo Gaming, and then they upset Anyone's Legends. But Anyone's Legends aren't a very good team either, so you can't give them too much credit for that win. I was surprised that they ended up pulling that off, and I was happy to see it happen, because you don't really want to see anybody go winless the entire year. But their team does not seem like it has a roster that is going anywhere. New, in my opinion, is not a good top laner for the LPL. Frigid has looked bad, like pretty bad. There were some Olaf games where he just looked not good at all. Like, he should not be a starter in the LPL. Captain is someone who was thought of highly as a potential LPL level starter, but he hasn't really put it together. I don't think he's as young as you'd want for like a player who hasn't proven anything at the LPL level. And then Puff and Southwind, we've seen them from Invictus Gaming. They were not able to remain the starters for Invictus Gaming, and that's not a good sign because they tried out so many different combinations of bot laners, and just none of them worked out. So that's team number 17. In 16th, we have LGD. So LGD is a team that has a good win. They were able to beat OMG, which was pretty surprising. But I don't expect them to really do much. I think that was like one of their top range of outcome results. So in the top lane, they have Fearness and Garvey. I don't love either one of those players. Fearness has looked good at points, though. And Garvey did look okay sometimes. Shadow, I think, is a little underappreciated. I think you could take Shadow and put him on most teams in the West, and he would do well because of his style, which is also part of the reason why I think Elyoya is overrated, but that's a different topic for another day. Yedge, I haven't been impressed so far. Eric and Jinzhao, I'm not a big fan of either of those players. I don't see this team turning into something in the summer, for example. I just don't think the talent is there. At 15, we have World Elite. And World Elite has been running out a roster that I didn't really expect to see going into the season. I thought that Xie was coming back into World Elite, and I also thought that they'd have Beishang, but Beishang has not been able to play yet this year. So they have Biu, View, Shanks, Stay, and Xing, and they have not looked good. And I know that they've been losing a lot, but it's just they haven't looked good, even taking into consideration their competition. So they lost to Weibo Gaming, V5, Top Esports, and LNG. So the one thing I will say for World Elite is when Beishang comes back into the team, I could see World Elite being a team that moves up either one or two tiers and has some surprising performances because Beishang is that good. Beishang is a very, very good jungler, and I hope that he either gets sold to Top Esports or turns things around for World Elite. That's that. In 14th, we have Anyone's Legends. So, Anyone's Legends, I have the Rogue Warrior logo because that's the team that they bought. But ZDZ, Xiaohao, Maple, Betty, and Chow Chow. So Maple and Betty are an okay veteran presence for the team. I'm pretty sure they've both been on the same team before, and they did look good in their first match that Maple was in. That was their match against RNG. They made that a pretty competitive series, but they followed that up with a 2-0 loss to Weibo Gaming, which I don't really give them too much flack for. And then the loss to Thunder Talk, just in my mind, solidifies that they're a bottom 5 team. Not much more to say about them. Then we have Invictus Gaming. So with Invictus Gaming, I think that Shun is a good player. XZZ looks interesting. I think that he does play the right champions for this meta and is willing to play some of the counter champions like LeBlanc and Vex. So that's a player that I'm somewhat intrigued by. Maybe they can make the move into the top tier, and maybe that's something that I would want to change. Like maybe Anyone's Legend should be down one more team slot, and then World Elite and Invictus Gaming both, in my mind, have the chance to go up a tier or two. So like taking their potential into consideration. But Xiao Yuji, I think is how you say the AD carry's name. He's actually looked okay in certain spots as well. And then Lucas is a holdover from the previous roster, so that's the support they think has done the best. They had like 3 different supports last year. But I don't see them going much further than that. I do think that the rest of the teams we're going to talk about have some upside, have higher upside, which is always important to take into consideration. But if you look at Invictus Gaming, they haven't won a single game since they 2-0'd Thunder Talk. They played OMG, LNG, RNG, and Ultra Prime. And Ultra Prime is the first team we're going to talk about in the next tier. That's the E-Star logo, but they're the team that took E-Star's spot. And this might be surprising to some people, those teams in that area, but I think it's more of a I'm trying to give credit to the teams above them. I'm not trying to discredit the teams that are in this tier. I think that these teams are pretty strong in different ways, but they're not full teams. So with Ultra Prime, ZS, Hacker, Cryan, Elk, Xiaoxi. I love Elk and Xiaoxi. I think that they're one of the better bot lanes in the league, and they have very high upside from like a playmaking perspective. And Elk has shown that he's one of the more consistent AD carries in the LPL. And if you took him and put him onto like top esports, I think that it would be more consistent because he doesn't make as many of the insanely bad plays that Jackie Love makes. But Jackie Love might have a higher ceiling, so it's kind of a trade there. I don't like Cryan very much, but I think that the Cryan's very similar to Humanoid in my mind. It's just that people say that Humanoid's a top 10 player in the world, and people don't say that about Cryan, and I don't think that either of them are. So that's fine. Hacker is an okay jungler. He doesn't have the same upside that a lot of the junglers above him have, so he kind of limits the upside of the team as a whole. And then ZS is an up-and-coming top laner. I think that they're okay, but they're not great. So far this year, they lost to LNG. They lost to Top Esports. They lost to EDG. They beat LGD, and they beat Invictus Gaming. So nothing super impressive in their results, but I think that we can expect some better performances from them in the future, and maybe take a match off of one of these teams that I have ranked above them. Next up, we have Rare Atom, and I'm perennially low on Rare Atom. I don't like their players very much. I don't like their play style, and that's always going to be an issue for me. So it's the kind of team where you need to understand what you're going to get when you come here, because it's always going to be somewhat anti-Rare Atom. So we have Cube, Leon, Strive, iBoy, and Zora / Yuyanja. They go back and forth. Cube is maybe league average top laner. He's better than a couple of the top laners we've talked about so far. Leon is an interesting jungler. Invictus Gaming picked him up because they believed in his upside, but that's when Invictus Gaming really started to struggle, and that was a meta that didn't fit Leon's playstyle at all. Invictus Gaming going into the 2020 year, that was an assassin jungle meta at first with like Kiana and Talon and those kinds of champions, and Leon was good at that, so it almost was a perfect storm for Invictus Gaming. But then it went the other way. It became more of a Graves jungle meta, and it just never worked out for Leon on Invictus Gaming. But maybe we can get better performances out of Leon where they can actually carry from the jungle, and it shows why Invictus Gaming was so interested in bringing him into their roster, because they were former world champions. Strive, I don't know much about. I haven't been impressed so far. And then iBoy is held in high regard in China. I don't really see it as much. He's more of an upset style of AD carry, where he's generally not going to lose the game in the laning phase, scale up into the mid and late game team fights, and is going to do their job. But I want more out of my AD carries than that. So that limits his upside in my mind. And then the supports are okay, but they're not anything special. Next up, we have OMG. So I do like OMG. I like their upside. I think that Cream is a very good player. Shanji is still a big question mark in my mind. He has had some good performances and some bad performances. They beat Thunder Talk. They lost to They beat Thunder Talk. They beat Anyone's Legends. They beat Invictus Gaming. They lost to BLG, which was a tough match, but they actually should have won that match in my mind. In game 2, they kind of threw really hard. They lost 2-0 to EDG, which is okay. They lost to LGD, which was terrifying, and they beat Top Esports 2-0, which is a great result for them, and that should really people will think more highly of them because they beat Top Esports. I didn't pick them to beat Top Esports, but I liked the idea of them beating Top Esports because I think that Cream is really good. I just didn't expect them to be able to do that against Knight. And we'll talk about Top Esports later on. But let's keep moving. So OMG is the team in this range that I'm the most excited by, because I think that Kareem is just much better than the other mid laners in this tier. And then we have Gory. So Gory was on Nongshim last year, had a good year, transfers over to the LPL, gets onto FPX. FPX did really well in that preseason tournament, the Demacia Cup. They come out of the gate beating RNG, which is a good win, beating LGD, which means nothing, beating anyone's Legends, which means nothing. So they were going into their match against JDG, and everybody was giving them a lot of credit. I'm pretty sure I was on the JDG side there. They lose to JDG. So for the people who had FPX overrated and JDG underrated, that kind of just, shocks everyone. But wasn't that surprising to me. I was just happy that I was kind of in line with the results. And then they lose to LNG, which you're not going to downgrade them too much, losing to LNG. But the reason why I have them in this portion of the tier list and not in the B tier is because I just don't think that they have the same level of quality players as the teams that are above them. And I would pick these other teams to beat them heads up in a match. So we have 3 new teams now to consider: BLG, JDG, V5. So let's start with V5. V5, we have Rich, Karsa, Rookie, Photic, and PP God. So let's take a look at their results. So far this year, they've beaten World Elite, they've beaten Rare Atom, they've beaten V5, and they lost to Weibo Gaming. So after their first 3 matches, going into their match against Weibo Gaming, they were the favorites against Weibo. I like Weibo a decent amount more than V5. Rich is an okay player, but he's not a true difference maker in the position. He's like smack dab in the middle of top laners in the LPL and can compete with the better ones, which is going to solidify that portion of the map during their games against like Breathe or the better top laners, like Flandre, Bin, Breathe. Those are the ones I like the best. Ale, like Flandre, those kinds of players. He can go even with those guys or potentially win that lane if the draft goes their way. But that's about it. They're like Zoom. They're not as good as Zoom, but they're in that play style. So that is that. Then we have JDG. So JDG had a really rough beginning to the split. They played EDG and lost, which is fine. It's EDG. They just won the world championship. They lose to RNG, but going like back-to-back losses, people start to doubt, JDG and say, "Oh, that player's horrible." That always happens. So we have 369, Kanavi, Yagao, LPC missing. Did LPC continue to play, or did they switch him out? JDG. Yeah. Oh, Hope. So now it's Hope. Let me switch that in my sheet. So now we have Hope. Hope and missing is going to be a better combination than LPC and missing. So then we got them. They beat LGD. They beat FPX. So I think that JDG is still. People are still going to remember that they lost their first 2 series and didn't look good in their minds. But beating FPX kind of solidifies the idea that they are a middle table team. They'll be competitive for playoffs. Kanavi's one of the best junglers in the world still. And it'll be exciting to watch them moving forward. It might actually be a good thing that they have 369 instead of Zoom, because 369 is a more variant player. And then you can just let Yagao like swap Victor, Corki, or play the other mid lane champions that fit into that, like the LeBlanc counter, the Zoe, stuff like that, because he does play Zoe pretty well. And then the last team in this tier is BLG. And I think that some people would want me to rank BLG higher, but BLG is still like the barometer team for me. I think that you can figure out how good you think a team is by how you think they'd play against BLG. So BLG beat Weibo Gaming, which is a good result for BLG. They beat OMG, but they should have lost to OMG. They beat Rare Atom, where that matters more to other people than me because I don't have a high opinion of Rare Atom. And then they lose 2-1 to RNG. RNG as a quote-unquote short home favorite was a good spot in my mind, and we ended up getting that one right when they played each other on the 27th. That was the last match before the break. So I think that BLG is given a little too much credit. It hurts me to say that because I like a lot of their players. Like, I love Breathe. I think that Weiwei's okay, but not great. I think Fofo is very overrated. I think that Doggo is good. I think that Crisp is good. And I don't know what Uzi's going to be, but I'm not going to upgrade them when Uzi comes back. I think that Doggo is good enough to where it's not going to make much of a difference. I think that the difference between my opinion and everyone else is really the mid jungle. Like, they believe in Weiwei, they believe in Fofo. I just don't. So that is that. Let's go to the A tier. So in the A tier, we have 3 more teams. We have RNG, Weibo Gaming, aka The Shining, and Top Esports. So I do think that Top Esports is still better than BLG, JDG, V5. They have looked bad recently, and their performances haven't been good. They start off the season losing to Rare Atom with Tion starting, but then they beat Ultra Prime, and I think that is a good result. They beat World Elite, but it was relatively close, so that's scary. They lose to V5. You're not going to like freak out because a team loses to V5. V5 is close enough to them in talent that they can be competitive. And then they lose to OMG, and again, this is where talent evaluation matters, because if I didn't think that Cream was a very good mid laner, then that would upset me more. And that would make me change my opinion more about Top Esports. But now we're going into a 2-week break. They have more time to try to figure this out. I think that their team is too talented to be bad long term. Knight is still one of the best mid laners in the world. The draft has been horrible for Top Esports. Xiaopeng hasn't looked good so far. I don't expect them to be that bad for very long. So it depends. Like, if we come back out of break and they lose 1 or 2 more matches, then maybe we start to get a little bit more afraid. But I'm not going to change anything at this point. So, like, this RNG match is going to be very important. If that money line's very far out of whack, then you can just take Top Esports in that matchup, and that'll be a good test for them. So let's go over the lineup real quick. So they have Zoom, who is a good top laner, Xiaopeng, Knight, Jackie Love, Zhuo. So they're only gonna get better from here. I don't see them bottoming out in like the B or C tier or being a bottom of the table team going into playoffs. Next up, we have Weibo Gaming. So Weibo Gaming, aka The Shining. We have The Shine in the top lane, SFM, Angel, Huanfeng, and Sword Art. Their matchup against V5 isn't probably getting as much credit as it should. They also, in their match against BLG, I think they got slapped by BLG, actually, in the first and third games. But, actually, no, I think they won the first game and then lost the second and third in pretty bad fashion. But that win over V5 is going to be very important as time goes on. Next, when we get back from break and they play against FPX, that's another spot where people are going to say that FPX is like a good team, or might be more reliable for DraftKings purposes. Like, I get that part of it. Weibo Gaming, a lot of the time their games look ugly because the Shy and SFM just make ridiculous plays that are either going to win your team the game or just make it look like you're intentionally losing. But I like that. I like that style because they can come back from any deficit. They're willing to make the insane play that will get them back and steal games from people. And I love that in the teams that I support. So I still have Weibo Gaming ranked pretty high. Then number 3, I have RNG. So Bin, Wei, Xiaohu, Gala, Ming. I am not the biggest Gala fan. I say it all the time. But Xiaohu is amazing. Bin is probably underrated. Like, yes, he was on Suning when they made it to the World Finals and was a big part of that. And I think people kind of forget how important he was to that roster because it's a lot easier to give credit to mid laners and AD carries. Like, yes, he was with Huanfeng and Sword Art, but they could not play that style without Bin. And again, it's not going to be the best for DraftKings purposes sometimes, but in regards to like overall talent and overall strength as a team, I think that RNG is very good. And it hurts me to put them above Weibo Gaming. I wish that Weibo Gaming was just straight up better than RNG. But that's kind of the case. Did I just get a voicemail? I feel like I know that number. But yeah, so that's the end of the A tier. Leaving two teams in the S tier, we have EDG and LNG. So I think that EDG is the second best team. I had them as like an honorary first place because they won the world championship. But I think if you watch EDG and you watch LNG, you can't say that EDG is the best team in China. Let's take a look at their performances so far this split. So EDG beat JDG 2-0, but that was JDG looking pretty bad. They beat Thunder Talk, which doesn't mean anything. They go 2-1 against Ultra Prime, which, if you're the number one team in China, you want it to look a little bit more convincing. I do respect Ultra Prime, though, and stylistically, that matchup is relatively close, or can lead to close-looking games, is what I should say. And then they beat OMG. So that one looks a little bit more impressive after OMG 2-0's top esports. But again, I think like Flandre is a good player, is good enough to win a world championship, obviously, is going to do well in lane against a lot of players, and has a really deep champion pool to get into spots that like they can exploit a draft. And you need your players to be able to punish the other team when they leave certain champions open or blind pick certain champions. And you get that with Flandre. Jai, good jungler, not a great jungler, probably overrated at this point in terms of carry potential, but he does his job well, and it allows Scout and Viper to kind of take over in the late game and just play team fights a certain way. A lot of teams get credit for being team fighting teams because they get a lot of kills. That's not really the most important aspect of team fighting. Like, yes, you need to get kills to be a good team fighting team, or being a good team fighting team will result in kills, but it's more about getting to a particular part of the game in a predictable fashion where you're close enough to win a team fight from a deficit. So like, yeah, you're 2, 3, 4,000 gold down, but because of how the team drafts around Viper, it allows them to win team fights that some other teams in the world just can't. They just can't win from a deficit, from a gold deficit. And then that leaves LNG being the top team in the LPL, and I don't think that they're the best team in the world right now. I kind of think that Gen G is the best team in the world right now, but LNG is definitely in consideration for that spot, and I just think that their roster is overall better than EDG. So we have Ale in the top lane. If you just told me who do I want Ale against Flandre, like, I think that Ale is overrated, but I do probably want him over Flandre. Tarzan against Jai. Tarzan is one of the best junglers, if not the best jungler in the world, and has been one of the best junglers in the world for multiple years. Duanbi against Scout. I'll take Duanbi every day. And then Light and Lumao against Viper Mako. That's where the difference is. I think that Viper is better than Light, and Mako is probably better than Lumao. Lumao's been playing, I would say, bad so far this year, and they're still undefeated. They're still a very powerful team. And that's going to be scary for a lot of other teams as time goes on. The fact that they're getting questionable performances out of their support and still winning all of their matches is going to be... They're going to be a tough team to beat in the future. So that's basically it. I mean, if you feel very different than I do about a certain team, let me know in the comments section. I want to get to 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. So we're about 100 away. I'm trying to think of some other things to attract subscribers, maybe do some giveaways in the future. But that's all I've got. We're just going to keep trucking, keep pumping out good videos for everybody, give the information to the people. If you like this kind of content and you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon. You'll get access to Discord as well. We have a good community there. Everybody's always talking about the games. You can kind of share in each other's victories and support people who are going through tough streaks in DFS and betting. So if that's your thing, feel free to check it out. And if you join Patreon, make sure to reach out to me on Twitter or through Patreon or through the YouTube channel to make sure you get access to Discord. But that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.